and Mike Snow and Emily Cook and a few others who have been interested in getting it going are hoping to do that. And so if you are interested in the possibility of participating in this kind of program, our mailing list in the registration area, that garden room over there, you can put your name and just put craft in parentheses, and then I can contact you more. But what we'll do is we'll have probably a schedule for 2010 of visits to different farms and things. And so if you have interns or workers on your farm and you think that maybe the educational component could use a boost, this is a way that we can all pool resources to make all of our farm projects more educational. All right, so without further ado, I will hand it over to the Martins family and look forward to learning more about Lakeview.
Thank you. We'll need the shades now.
Okay.
Good morning, and thank you so much for inviting us. These are our family vacations. And it's a wonderful opportunity to travel around the country and also to see what other people are doing and to learn ourselves about other people's challenges, their solutions. We're all cracking the same nuts. And that's one of the neat things about our friendship with Eric Mann over the years is that, you know, what they're doing on 6 acres is not that different than what we're doing on, well, we've got about 1,400 acres now.
Yes.
And so, you know, we're working on 2 very different scales, different equipment, different crops, different markets, but the philosophy behind it, the decision-making behind it, isn't all that different.
And the agronomics and the biology is the same.
And so, you know,
one of the early organic conferences we went to, a friend of who's now a friend of ours was presenting. He's from Canada, and I wasn't even going to listen to that program. It wasn't something that interested me, but we sat there, and all of a sudden it became interesting. And I contacted Murray, and I described, because I was not able to drink tea, I was not able to drink milk. There were different foods that bothered me. This was before I even had the paralysis problem. And Murray said, most farmers your age have those problems, and I can fix it. And he was right. He put me on a series of herbal detoxifications, and I was able to start feeling better. And it made a tremendous difference. But what it told us was that I was accumulating, in my years of farming conventionally, some really bad effects of the way we were farming.
back in the late 90s, we were at a PASA conference up in Pennsylvania, and the keynote speaker was William McDonough. Now, Bill McDonough is a architecture professor here in Virginia, down in Charlottesville. I don't know if he's still there anymore. I think he's retired and is a consultant now. But he has written a number of brilliant books about design. And we were all sitting there, farmers sitting there listening to this architecture professor about design, thinking, what could he possibly say to us that would resonate? And when he started talking about design, we realized that this truly is the core of how we plan what we do on our farm. Because how we design a system is largely will determine what the outcomes are. You know, if you design something to be proactively improving, that's what we'll get. If we don't make any changes, why are we surprised if we don't get anything better? So what he has said is, design is the signal of intention. Our goal is not to make a less bad system in organics. Our goal should be to make a much better system, to put the filters in our minds rather than at the end of pipes. And that's what we try to do in how we make our decisions on our farm. We're trying to design a system that is better, that the outcomes will be better.
Okay, one thing we did when we started farming organically, went to our extension specialist. And he explained to us that it was really silly to talk about farming organically on any kind of a scale. This was something hippies could do in their backyards. But to talk about doing it on a farm our size was absolutely ridiculous. So that was the extent of the help we got from that area at that point. But we also didn't take him at his word. We knew that people had farmed before they invented chemicals. That wasn't too hard to figure out. So we went to the Cornell Library, and we wanted to study how did scientifically advanced farmers farm before we had these chemicals. And weed control was my biggest question. And it was amazing. We got to the Mann Library, and either they hadn't written books before 1945, or they didn't think those books were important enough to have where we could find them. But we did find in the archives some very important work. And there was a professor of weeds in Germany. He lived to be into his 90s. His name was Bernhard Ademacher. And he wrote a paper on weeds in 1939 where he said something that turned our thinking on weeds upside down. Problem like this is actually see what we're looking at. What can we learn from our mistakes? We should look at when we have an insect problem or a weed problem or some kind of a pest problem, we should try to learn all we can from it. The first question shouldn't be how do I kill it? The first question should be why is it here? You know, how do we look upstream, like the metaphor that Sandra Steingraber used, and instead of trying to figure out how to revive the half-dead victim, figure out what caused the injury and how do we remove that. And what we're seeing here is part of the healing. There's one concept I'd like to make sure I don't miss here. And that's we think about when we plant a seed. Let's make it a corn seed. And we'll put time across so that this is the day you plant. This is 1 day, 2 days, 3, on a cross. And the other graph is how susceptible to damage that plant will be. The day we plant corn, we could go in with a drag or a disc, and we're going to have no impact on that seed. Unless we flip it all the way up on top of the ground, we're not going to damage it. So let's say the susceptibility to damage is low here, kills the plant here. So after we plant, we're going to have a period of several days that we're down here. As it germinates, we're going to become much more sensitive. When it comes to where it's actually at the surface, suddenly we could kill a high percentage of them. And then after it's up, it becomes even more susceptible to damage, where we'd kill even more of them. Then as they get bigger, they get tougher. Then as they grow, their susceptibility to mechanical damage goes down pretty rapidly. And you won't go all the way back down to zero. I probably started that, but it would be something like that. Now, how would that graph look for weeds? They're much shallower. They're much smaller in seed. But if we stirred our weeds here, the damage would be about zero. So with them, we're starting out here, but they're smaller, they come quicker. They become susceptible to the point of being damaged sooner. And then they become tough quite a lot faster than the crop. You see we've got an opportunity here. We've got a difference with a large seeded crop and with a weed between the timing of when we're going to damage one severely but not hurt the other one too badly. Now we have to remember something else with weeds. Whenever we do tillage, it's the same thing as planting weeds. Because when we do tillage, we're starting another flush of weeds growing. This is part of this managing dormancy. So let's say we could, and a lot of this is experience, but let's say we decide that we're going to be using a weeder or some aggressive tool right here. We're doing relatively little damage to the crop. We're wiping out most of the weeds. This is something called blind cultivation. There's a number of tools that could be used for it, and the tools depend on the crop. That day, we're starting this cycle again. And we're starting another flush of weeds. And that's going to come exactly the same cycle all over again. If we time our second pass of tillage to control weeds, we should try to hit it here. If we do this at the wrong time, we could actually make our weed problem worse.
Or hurt our plants, our crop.
Or both. In fact, if we timed it right here, we're not going to do much to the weeds, but we're going to really knock the crop for a loop. And there was research in Europe where the researcher was a good scientist, but he was trying to figure out how many days do we go with a weeder. And he tried all these different days instead of watching the crop. And he showed statistically that we couldn't control weeds using weeders. And his results were right, but his interpretation was incomplete. If we're going to use blind cultivation for early season weed control, we need to understand this. We need to be able to go out there and dig. You know, when you see the weeds from the pickup truck, you're already off in this area where it's too late.
The timing of the weed control, especially for the blind tillage, is before the weed seeds emerge, when they're just little white threads in the soil. And if you see them from the pickup truck or from the car window, or as you walk into the garden, you see this carpet, you've missed that window of opportunity. It's not that you're not going to be able to get those weeds.
Overlapping. I mean, I'd love to retire into livestock production. That looks fun to me. But, you know, and let someone else do the bit. Right. But it has a slightly different vision, so it's not clear cut what that might be, but we do have some, you know, we do have a little bit of leeway. It's not like it's all it can be is a market garden.
I also like Joel Salatin's idea of the whole is more than the sum of its parts. That it'd be possible to have a farm evolve so that different enterprises could actually be sharing some of the resources in a way that each enterprise helps the other.
Well, I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you so
Thank
much. So the plan for the afternoon will be on the schedule, the rooms of the different sessions. You can attend any session. What was I going to say? Oh, the studio room, if you're wondering where that is, it's just further down the steps. Right below here, so very easy to find.
And Pablo, can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
When we were kind of planning today, we kind of passed around this thing with there being people interested in kind of an informal discussion on what's involved with farming with horses. And we weren't sure there were enough people in attendance that would want to take advantage of that, so we didn't actually plan it into the day. But if there are a handful or so of people who would like to do that, maybe during that social hour we could get together and talk about that. So if there's interest, we want to respond to it, but we don't want to force everyone to sit through that, I guess would be the way to say it.
Okay, and oh yeah, lunch is right there, and what you do is they'll direct you to your seat, find a seat, and then go to the buffet. But seat first, okay?
Do you know if you're doing it?